So is it okay that I'm here, given that I'm just here to get advice, not give any?
Well, okay, here we go. We're live. I love kicking off a Freehands Friday with a question like that. So it is Friday, and the best part about Friday is there's no work tomorrow, unless you're, and it's Freehands Friday.
If you're a gigging musician, you're working.
That's right.
But if you're a gigging musician, you might be just getting started on your work week.
That's right. That's right. And if you got like a girlfriend or a significant other that's like a photographer or something like that, it's like goodbye. It's like your Monday. So, and that's exactly what we're talking about today, the gigging stickist. So today is Friday, October 16th, 2015. I'm Gene. I'm joined by Boaz. What up?
Hello.
Hey.
David.
Hey.
Flint. What's up, Flint?
I'm here.
Greg. Hi, Greg. Victor.
Hey.
All right, and it looks like Elias just joined us.
Hi.
Elias, you made it.
I made it. I
Cool.
just put the link.
Great. And I'm Gene. So welcome to Freehands Friday number 64. And we're going to talk about gigging, what to do, what not to do, maybe some kind of battle scars that you've got from like terrible gigs. I can tell you about the time I got booed off the stage in Florida and walked back to the hotel.
I want to hear that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Worst gig ever. So let's not open up the show with that. But
Okay, yeah.
kind of a quick introduction. Actually, David, since you joined us, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, and I'm going to have you kind of start us off with basically just tell us about like your most recent gig and what you're doing in Colorado, because I know that you play a lot out there, and so maybe tell us just a little bit of something like about just like working as a stickist, like just kind of start us off here.
Sure. So my last gig was last night.
Is David here? David, where are you?
Do you see me? Flint?
He's here.
I'm here.
Oh.
Is it
Go ahead,
all
David.
good?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, my last gig was last night. My next one's at 4 o'clock here. And yeah, and so I'm in Colorado. I'm in a little mountain town. It's kind of a tourist destination. I play lots of restaurant gigs, kind of background music, that kind of thing. So, and it's been going strong. I've been keeping really busy doing that. During the summer, it was like 7 to 9 gigs a week, just doing that. And so.
I don't hear anything.
You don't hear anything.
Sorry.
Oh.
Flint,
I hear you calling
your sound, man.
Hear you.
Okay.
So, David.
Yeah.
What would you do? You market yourself, or do you do mostly word of mouth stuff? Like if you're gonna get a gig, like take me from like start to finish. How does a gig happen, right? Like
that's a great question.
Let's start with this. You have no gig and you've got some gear, right? And you're looking for something to do on a Friday night.
Right.
Walk me through it.
Okay. So when I first got here, I was trying to find gigs, and I would like call people and I would email people, and nobody would return my call, nobody would answer my emails, and I was getting really discouraged about that. And most of the gigs I got at that time were word of mouth through friends, playing like artist receptions, things like that. And then I met this guy. I was at the farmer's market one morning. I was supposed to play there, and there was this cat sitting there with the guitar playing. Where I was supposed to be playing, and so I go up and I start talking to him, and he's like, "Oh, I hope you don't mind," and I go, "No, we've become good friends," and this is what he imparted to me. He goes, well, this is how I get gigs. I just show up, and I really took that to heart. So I just started. I'd drive around with my equipment in my car. I'd go out on a Friday, Saturday night to some restaurant that had a patio or some place like that I thought would be a good fit. I would go in and say, "Hey, you mind if I play for a couple hours? And if you like it, we can do something. If not, I'll just pack up and leave. No worries." And that has worked incredibly well.
Well, it doesn't hurt that you're also really good at the Chapman stick, right? And well, so something. So let me just say, there's not like I would when I go to look for like stick videos, your videos have tens of thousands of hits, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of hits. So like some of the Floyd has been very popular, and so allow me to kind of piggyback off of that thought, because I've used this very same tactic with Lorimar Winery, which is where I gig pretty consistently now, as well as a place called Viva Vino. So now that I'm thinking about it, the two places that I play with some consistency in Temecula, I've just showed up with a little keyboard amp and the stick and said, look, I know this is awkward, but let me just play for you people. I know you're having dinner, and it's like, and oftentimes there's usually like 6 or 7 people there, and they'll be like, well, this guy's just walked into my establishment and just promised me like basically free services. So what have I got to lose? So I would echo that. Exactly what you're saying. It's for real. Like if you're that confident enough, you can just show up, sit down, and play something that people enjoy, right? I mean, you can't be like pulling out like Mate Kudasai or something gnarly, like something that like people can't relate to. But if you come out and you play, right? Fleetwood Mac or Katy Perry or something like that. Like, oh, I know that song, right? You know that song. Makes them feel good, and it doesn't detract from what's going on in the room. Kind of play to the room. And I might kind of ask you about that, Flint, about like playing to the room, because I know that you do a lot of traveling, and you could be like in like a different like club or hall or venue like any given night of the week, right? So it's like you have to play to the room definitely. So maybe you can share a little bit about kind of how that all comes together. Can you hear me okay, Flint?
Sound of silence.
Okay. Yeah, we might. I think Flint might be having some audio, so hopefully we can work that out. So, Greg, let me ask you that question, right? You play a lot of different places. So, like, tell me about playing to the room.
Thanks to the room. Well, one of the things that I really like to make sure that I can do is hear myself, okay? If you can't hear yourself, right, then you're not going to be able to play, period. So you got to situate your amp. If you're going to play quietly, you got to get your amp up really near your head. You know, if you've got your amp way down by the floor, or you know, off to your side or whatever, and you're playing in a room that's a noisy room, you're not going to be able to hear what you're doing. It's just not going to happen. So first off, that's the main thing that I would like to get across. You got to be able to hear yourself. Number one, okay? I played a really interesting gig once where I was playing in this giant atrium lobby of this hospital, and my job was to be like ambient sound for this gig. And I realized when I was in there trying to play, I kind of had to play intellectually. I couldn't play by hearing what I was doing. And I just want to say, for some reason, I've ended up getting Dave muted and somebody else muted as well. There's a lot of muting going on. I'm not sure what's happening with that. Not that I don't want to hear what you have to say, Dave, but you're muted, man. I can't hear you. Oh, wow, wait a minute. Are you unmuted?
I am now unmuted.
You're not Oh, okay. So people have been muting themselves. Okay.
Can you hear yourself? That's the question, right?
Okay. So, but yeah, as far as playing the room is concerned, obviously when you're playing in a concert space, you know, you got to make sure that your volume is appropriate for the space. Sometimes you'll go into a room and the sound man is like a rock guy and he just wants to blast you in the room, and that may not be appropriate to the kind of thing that you want to do. So make sure that you communicate with the sound person, you know, how loud you want to be. Especially if you're opening up for another band or you're following another band, you know, you kind of want to gauge things based on what their audience is expecting. And the other thing is, if you're playing in a bar and you want to make sure that you can hear yourself over the crowd, don't play too loud, because when you play really loud, guess what? They're going to shout really loud, and it's going to be this endless cycle of who's going to be louder. And, you know, I guarantee you, even if you've got a really loud amp, you can't shout louder than a bar full of drunks.
Got to keep a balance.
Balance, yeah, exactly. And also be really sensitive if you're playing in a coffee house or something like that. make sure that you're not playing so loud for the space that people aren't going to enjoy what it is you're doing. If you're in a real listening room and people are really listening, bring it down. Don't put it up where it would be in that club. Bring it down to where people can listen to you without feeling like they have to struggle to listen to you. You know, like they comfortable listening volume. And like most of us, you know, I have a little bit of hearing loss compared to the general public out there, and so
What'd you say?
I got sensitive to the huh?
Can't hear you.
What?
And so I got to be sensitive to that fact when I'm playing in a quiet space, because there's going to be people there who are not used to listening to music as loud as I am, and if you want them to listen to you, don't blow them out of the water. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. So this is kind of cool. So one of the things that we started with is like basically, you know, getting the gig. How do you kind of market yourself? There's kind of a very grassroots way of going about that, which is kind of what David and I were talking about. So,
I want to go look for something. I want to see if I can find something to show you guys.
okay. And now we're talking about volume. So I think that's a pretty good starting place. If you're gigging with any sort of kind of consistency, you know, a good thing to do is to have a ritual, right? So like the first thing you do is like, where's the power, right? Like so, you know, like right, we're not like flute players, right? So it's like you gotta find an outlet or 2 or 5. You got to make sure you can reach it. You got to figure out, you know, where am I pointing my amp and that whole sort of thing. You got to have a ritual. And
you know, last night the gig I played, I walked in, I set up where I usually set up, and I went to plug into the plug, and there was one outlet available, which is normal. That's all I need, but it had a broken off ground plug in it. And so I had to go out to the car and get a pair of needle nose pliers and yank it out.
Like, did you like wear gloves or like you have sneakers on or something? Like I get.
It has insulated handles. I'm pretty comfortable around electricity, so.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So we're getting some people can't hear you, David. So we're already starting to apply what Greg has shared with us. So. Yeah, there's always going to be some kind of like snag you haven't seen. So Flint, a little earlier, we were hitting you up, but I think that we were having some issues with sound. And we talked about playing to the room. So we've kind of talked a little bit about what Greg was talking about, you know, like being able to hear yourself. So I kind of wanted to talk about like playing to the room, but maybe you've got something that you want to share about just like gigging out, because I know that like on any given night when you were like playing in like a different city and like every other day basically, I can't even imagine what you've been up against. So maybe you can like share some stories with us about like what you came up against when you were traveling, you know, playing stick.
Well, I definitely want to say that while hearing yourself is very important, it's also important to listen. And that might be one of the most important things about playing in general. But yeah, we did just go on a tour recently. Our most recent tour, we went out to Colorado and back to Florida. This was actually one of our more brief tours so far, but the great thing was that every show was pretty spectacular and really worth doing. So, you know, we're starting to learn that it's better to have, you know, a few really great shows than a lot of shows where some of them were dead. And you know, if you start trying to overwork yourself when you don't really need to, you just get worn out quick. So that's something that I've been really valuing, is just only booking shows that are going to be really special, and you start to learn, you know, what shows those are going to be, the really special ones. But then again, we all need to make a living, so, and I've never been known to turn down a gig.
Right. So there's something to be said for quality, and I suppose, you know, you look at a cat like well, I think Greg does some of these shows. I know that Bob does a lot of traveling, you know, so he'll go out and he plays these festivals. And probably, David, you probably get a taste of that in the summers there as well. You've probably got festivals that you frequent and things that you hit. And people that can depend on you for, you know, a half hour, 60 minutes a set. Tom G comes down and plays like 6 hours at the San Diego Renaissance Fair, whatever it is. And so, and people know where to find him every single year. So he's selling CDs and giving out cards and all kinds of stuff. And so, you know, and like, so that there's, you know, there's another kind of ritual. But I suppose what I was getting at was, booking quality gigs. And so hopefully, right, so like Flint, when you go back next year, right, you've got that $200, $300 guarantee, whatever it is, locked, or $1,000 guarantee, whatever it may be. You've established that relationship, and they know you, and they're like, oh, this guy plays a stick, you know, and it's like clarinet too. It's like you've never seen anything like this. So it's like your reputation will start to precede you.
Yeah, and not to mention making connections with the audience. You know, you collect email addresses. You let the people know when you're coming back to town who really care, and that's how you build your audience.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Greg, you found what you were looking for there?
I didn't find what I was looking for. You know, I'm embarrassed that I couldn't find it. So I'll tell you what it is, and this is why I'm embarrassed that I couldn't find it. I have the tip basket from my very first solo stick gig that I ever played 29 years ago. And I keep it in my studio.
Is it like the sound of like a nickel being shaken in a coffee?
It's amazing. No, I still have it. It was at a vegetarian restaurant called the Garden Gourmet, and you played for tips and a good meal. And you know, it was just like, okay, that was my very first stick solo gig, and it was 29 and a half years ago. So,
Wow.
you know, it's pretty cool. I've got a bunch of things actually lying around here that I'm going to show you guys that I've had for many, many, many years. Some of them are very useful tools. So we'll talk about gear later on. But I wanted to talk briefly about what Flint was saying about the quality, you know, the gigs, taking a gig, you know, not turning down a gig. I've learned how to turn down gigs. And turning down gigs that you feel like maybe this is a little bit of an iffy gig, you know, maybe you don't want to do it. Go with your gut and, you know, just say, okay, you know what, this doesn't really sound like it's going to fly. So thanks, but no thanks, you know. It's a good skill to have. But sometimes when you're opening up for somebody else, like you're on a tour and you're opening up for someone, you have no choice in the matter. You do every show, you're on the road with that band, and you're going where they're going. And chances are you don't get the green room backstage, and you don't get the hotel room and all of that stuff. So you're out there opening up to somebody, and I hope I don't embarrass Michael telling you this story. But I was on tour opening up for Michael Manring once, and we were he was trying to fill a date in the tour, and we got this gig at this club in Philadelphia called the Firehouse, which you think, oh, Firehouse, oh, that sounds quaint. Well, it's called the Firehouse because it's literally across the street from the Firehouse. And it's a hole-in-the-wall bar that's like...
I know that place.
You know the place? And there's no windows in the bar. And you go in there, and so I pull up to the gig, and this should have been my clue. It really should have been my clue. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I pull up, I'm getting ready to load in, and there's a guy sitting hunched over a table, and he stands up from the table, turns towards me, and just heaves all over my car. I just thought, this is a sign. You know, this gig is going to be like this. And yeah, it was one of those gigs where like audience came and they were asking Michael and I, they're like, why are you guys playing here?
Exactly.
Ever come here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Chicken wire, right? Like something crazy like that.
I'm just glad the windows were closed. That's all I can say.
Yeah. The polite pass, thanks. It's not. And so much of that comes from knowing who you are as a stickist, right? So you have to know, like, you have to feel, you know, like Greg, you've been doing this a long time, right? Flint, Dave, you guys have been doing this a long time. If you're still kind of getting your footing, you know, you might not know. And sometimes, you know, people will just go with the novelty. They're like, oh, cool, it's a great conversation piece. Come and play, you know. And you're pulling out Red and something really gnarly and epic and proggy, and they're like, wow, did you know, like, the Beatles, you know, or something like you can relate to? And it's kind of like, that's not what I'm about. That's not why I play music. It's not why I'm here. So, like, knowing who you are, right, Greg? Like, you know,
Find that venue. If you can find the venue that will actually let you do whatever you want to do, that venue is gold. Do whatever they want. You know, I mean, just like, okay, I want to keep this gig. I want to keep it forever. Miller's was like that. I could play at Miller's. I mean, Water on the Moon. I would never be able to do anything like that at any other club, pretty much. But the guy who ran Miller's, this guy named Steve Tharp, he was like, you guys, I love you guys. You just do what you do. People come here because they know to expect something really unique and different. And Tim Reynolds and I, we could clear his place in like 10 seconds. I'm not kidding. We could start a gig and it was like, "Rah!" and everyone would basically pay their cab and leave. And he would come in and he would just shake his head, and walk upstairs, and but he never told us not to do it. He was always like, "Okay, dude."
They'll be back. They'll get thirsty. They'll
He
be
was
back.
the only bar in Charlotte on the downtown mall in Charlottesville at the time, so he knew he had it locked.
Here, so let me ask that, Boaz, I want to ask you a question about this recent gig out in Mallorca, because I know that Guillermo had set something up with some of the places out there, which is kind of unique. So we're talking about the venue and what's unique about the venue, and I know that he had, or the group had some sort of arrangement where you guys were playing like pretty much every night, right? Like, or gigging in the afternoons, or practicing in the afternoons and then performing in the evening.
Well, I can't really call myself a performing stick player, but yeah, well, it was kind of open stage.
Mhm.
So we got to get some rehearsal from morning to afternoon.
Mhm.
The more veteran players taught us some simple things, each
Good.
one for his own level, just so we could play something live. That's about it. You can see the pictures. There were kind of 7 stick players at the same time. Sometimes it was kind of 3 players at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that 3 players is a good. I saw some of the videos, and it was just kind of fun to see, like you're saying, how you'll have kind of like a song leader, right, or someone who knows the piece inside out and can show you the different parts, and then
Yeah.
kind of lead it and kind of support everyone and kind of pick you up, right? Because if you're anything like me, right, like you kind of fail along the way, you need somebody to be like, shake it off, right? Like just like find that part again, get back into that groove. We talked about this, right? I showed you that earlier. So that's kind of a cool arrangement. So what was it like? So was this like your first time performing out with the stick then?
For me, it was, but unfortunately, it was kind of a bad experience for me because at the moment of truth, I couldn't hear anything I was playing. It was a 7 stick players. That's a kind of experience. Yeah, I couldn't hear anything I was playing.
Yeah, that can be frustrating. So I mean, and I can relate to that as
Gotta be able to hear yourself.
yeah, you got to be able to hear yourself. So, but and that's I suppose part of it though, right? Part of it is just kind of showing up. I mean, you're with a lot of other stick players. I mean, when are you going to have that kind of gig again, right? Where you're like competing with 6 other stick players, right? Like never.
Yeah,
Probably about 3 or 4 times a year.
I got the question. How for all these performance stick players here, how different it is for you playing in a bar or something in the background compared to playing in a show where people are actually coming to a show where to see you perform live?
Oh.
One of them's a lot more fun.
Yeah, I'd like to address that because I mainly do background music. And when I'm put in a performance situation, I mean, that freaks me out. And it's something that I'm working towards. I'm trying to get more and more performance kind of gigs and house concerts and things like that. But I can walk into a place, just jam-packed with people all eating dinner and talking and stuff and set up and play and just do whatever I want and I'm fine. But if you put me up on a stage and somebody introduces me, I'm just like, oh crap. The nerves kick in and all that, and it's a very different experience.
Doesn't it interrupt you that you're playing and someone eating in front of you?
That doesn't bother me at all. I mean, it's I'm in a situation like that. I'm the ambience. I'm just providing kind of setting the mood. So I'm cool with that. But it's very different to have people's attention focused on you.
And David, I'm glad you said so because there is value in ambient music, and it's valuable to have somebody playing live music versus canned radio. So that's a whole nother field of a type of performance.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's it. I get lots of great feedback about doing dinner music basically, and people come up and tell me they appreciate it. You know, it really added to the evening. And it's kind of, I'm glad Greg brought up the volume thing, because one of the main compliments I get from people is like, and it was the perfect volume. You know, we could have a conversation, we could listen, we could, you know, and I try to be very aware of that.
And that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Also, you know, I just want to chime in here and say, if you don't want to be doing background music gigs, don't do background music gigs. You know, if it's something that you're like, oh man, I want to be performing, then doing the background music gigs could be very demoralizing, you know, as a player. Don't just take the background music gig just to make the money if it's something that's going to bum you out. You know, don't put yourself in that situation where your own energy as a person is compromised by the fact that you're there doing something that you don't want to be doing. Just like you may not want to take the gig as the bassist in the country band with your Chapman stick because you're not going to play music that's challenging for yourself. Put yourself in a situation where it means something to you. And yeah, I know I'm trying to get a curtain up, but you know, trying to work it out here. It's this beautiful autumn afternoon sun. Sorry. But
can I add something to that, Greg? I'd like to add something to that. So
okay.
So if you have a band, all right. Well, let me kind of give you an example, right? So once upon a time, when I was in my early 20s, right, I had a band, and I was much more like performance oriented. So we played an evening at a club with 3 other bands, right? And we were, you know, entertaining. People were there to see the band. People were there to, you know, drink alcohol and meet other people and maybe have some food. But really, part of the allure were these guys that were on stage playing, you know, their creative music. It kind of comes back to, as if you're gigging, if you're working, if this is what you want to do, that you have some sort of semblance of what the who's your audience, right? Like, what are they expecting to see? And so, you know, for stuff that, you know, Flint is doing, you know, right? Like it's you know, you're performing in a duo more often than not, right? And it's original music, and you've kind of set it up. I mean, you've planned this tour. Each performance is unique, you know. So like you contrast that with someone with like David has got going on, where he's, you know, kind of frequenting these places. They know him, he knows them. People come into this restaurant, they might recognize him from another place he played in town, and they can make requests and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like, it comes down to, you know, like, right, you booked a gig, there shouldn't be any surprises about it. And kind of to what Greg is saying, you know, are you happy doing it? And it sounds like you guys both are. Like, you're both doing your thing, this is where it's at. More recently, I thought that I wanted to do more performance stuff, and was playing at, there's a place out here in downtown Temecula called the Merc. And it's kind of hard to book, right? And because it's like $15, and the drinks are a little bit expensive, and it's kind of got an art gallery feel. And I'm still kind of working up my kind of audience down here. But
aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly. So, but you know, Temecula is a small town, and right, so the people that come to the wineries aren't necessarily the people that live here. But something interesting happened the other day. The place where I get my haircut, what's left of my haircut. Somebody said, "Oh, I heard some big people talking about the chopping stick," and she chimed in and just leaned over and goes, "It was Gene Perry, wasn't it?" And they're like, "Yeah, that was his name. He was doing a fine job." And I was like, "Wow!" Right? In this town of like 107,000 people, you know, I'm like, you know, Leo Gosselin moved out of town, and now I've got like, you know, like a chance. I've got a shot at it. When I moved to town, I was like, "Oh, we're done. Let me get here." You know, got it. But that being said, I'm trying to do a balance where you have some gigs where you're playing at restaurants, you're playing at wineries, you're playing smaller halls, or maybe you're doing kind of the free coffee shop here and there, but then also actually try to do a performance gig, which is what I'm trying to do, and work with other musicians. I work with Gina Ferreira and sometimes like a trumpet player, and so we get together and we do a trio, and so we all kind of pool our resources together and make it kind of an event. That takes a lot of planning, and often takes, you know, it's like, unless you bring in the people that the club is expecting you to bring, there's a different expectation there. Whereas when you're playing at a place that gives you a flat rate and you play from 6 to 9 and you play X amount of minutes on the hour, you're going to get paid, right? They're going to give you a meal, maybe a glass of wine or something like that, and that's like fair is fair. So,
just want to throw something out there, which is, if you are doing these kinds of background music gigs, the best thing about them is it's a great opportunity just to practice your repertoire. Just run your tunes. And maybe there's something you haven't played in a while, and like, oh man, I should play this tune. I haven't played it in a long time. I recently did a kind of a background music gig with Gina Sobel, a flute player, and she got us this gig when she was in town. And we ended up playing a couple of tunes I hadn't played in like years.
What's music?
And it was like so fun just to say, okay, here's a chance to pull out this tune. It's the perfect environment for it, and use those opportunities just to practice, just to get back into touch with music maybe that you haven't played in a while and you really want to refresh yourself on.
What were some of those tunes, Greg, that you were?
Oh gosh, Where Are You Tonight from Shapes. I hadn't played that in ages. Mm. And then we played. That was the first time I performed that new tune, Finding Home. First time I performed that was with her there, and she's like, "Oh yeah, tell me what the chords are on this thing." And we played it, and she blew along with it. So something really old, something really new. It's just that's a really nice opportunity in a situation like that to do that.
Cool.
Whereas if you were performing, and you hadn't really worked up a very interesting arrangement of something, you might feel a little sheepish about pulling it out and playing it on a gig when people are actually really listening to what you're doing.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Hey, Vlad, I haven't really heard from you. Now, tell me really quickly, are you, I know that you've been working on some stuff. You're doing some solo stuff. Are you performing out in your neck of the woods, or?
I haven't ever performed live. Not even on a venue. I have never played for someone or with someone. But I do want to, and I think I'll probably start like something somewhere this winter. But on the other hand, I think like this every year. So like in half a year, I will join a band or something. But still, and I've been asked by a guy to record a couple of songs for him. He wrote the songs and he wanted a Chapman stick on his album, so I've joined him for recording. I haven't heard the final result yet. And we got on really good, so I think I'd probably join his band if it wasn't like 5,000 kilometers away from me. So we collaborated on internet, but so far we are unable to play together. I think if I'll ever start playing live, I'll start with solo gigs, because solo playing is what I'm most confident about. I have never played together with another musician.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite success stories is Kevin Kason, who, like David, may as well. You might have to sue him for playing all your music, right? He
I love
David
Kevin.
Tipton tunes and and plays them and goes out and plays them. So I think that it's a gig away. If you have 3 songs, I'd love to see you playing at some little coffee house out there, because the stuff that I see that you've done, that you've recorded, is fantastic. So I have to ask the question, why aren't you? Why aren't you? Right? You've got 3 songs, right?
Right. Well, the thing is that there are no such things as there's virtually no venues for background music here in Russia. You won't hear live musician in a restaurant and in a coffee shop. There are occasionally music evenings in coffee shops where you can actually hear some good music. I know a spring trio that plays John Zorn songs.
Wow.
But that's not background music. That's an evening where people come to watch you, and I don't feel like being in the center of attention at this point.
But if you were with a band, would you feel comfortable doing that? Like if you were playing bass parts with a drummer and a singer and a guitarist and keyboards?
Yes, frankly, I think that that a drummer makes you feel much more confident in your rhythm. It's much more challenging to play solo for me because you have to deliver it perfectly. Otherwise, you won't, keep the rhythm, keep the groove. But I don't have any band so far, and I think I'll work out some solo set earlier than I join a band or something.
Yeah, playing unaccompanied. I mean, that takes a long time to do. You've got to, right? You have to fail. I mean, speaking for myself only, of course, I've had to fail a lot. And the one thing that I found is just don't stop. Like, just like if you stop, then people turn around from their meal and they're like, that guy stopped. Like, what?
So yeah, for me, so the question is like, what really makes a successful gig? And because there are nights when I've made like lots of money, but I was playing on autopilot. I was just running through tunes, playing arrangements, and then there's other nights where I hardly make any money, but I'm stretching my own boundaries, and I'm improvising more and doing stuff like that, and it's much more rewarding. So there's a balance in there between there's nights where it's all about the food.
Right.
I get a really good meal. So that's something to look at.
I played out at Lorimar, and they said, "Oh, you get a bottle of wine," and they'd never done that before. I guess like this guy had never worked with. I guess the people that I work with never gave me a bottle of wine, so I opened it right there, and I was 2 glasses into my evening, and I thought, I have to cut myself off because I'm just fucking, like this is not going well. I had to kind of take a break and like go for a little walk or something, just because I realized it's adversely affected my performance. So the next Lorimar gig, I'll just be like, yep, I'll get it to go.
Well, I was playing at our local winery Vino Salida here this summer, Friday afternoons, and I got paid cash, and then I got $75 in wine each week, and so I've got a stash of wine here to last me all winter long.
Party is day.
Right.
Hey, can we steer this into a direction of like dealing with those gig situations? Because you're starting to get into a really interesting territory, which is what happens on the gig. And you learn from what happens to you on the gig and how to deal with the things that are going on. Because every gig, I think probably, Dave, those gigs where you made a lot of money, probably nothing bad happened on those gigs. You're just kind of like cruising through the gig. Nothing really bad happened. Nothing really great happened. You got your dough and you went home.
Right.
If you're living off of that, then obviously that's an important thing. But stuff happens on the gig, and it can get really interesting and really challenging, especially if you're playing where people are drinking. Because it's very unpredictable, the kinds of things that can happen.
Yeah. I'd like to say something really quickly. So at one of the Lorimar gigs, they have a guitar in the room, and I think there was like a Gibson representative or something like that here, and he may watch this video and think I'm a cock monkey for saying what I'm about to say, but I don't care. And he just kind of picked it up and tuned it up and was like starting to play it while I was playing. And he'd had a couple glasses of wine, but he wasn't like being a jerk about it. And then he started like calling out song requests, and like all of a sudden it was a duet. And really, like, this is exactly what Greg is talking about. So or what I think. And so it's just kind of like, well, the cameras are on, so to speak, and I can't really be like, hey, bud, because like we're talking about a room like twice the size of this room. It's a very small room. There's maybe 9, maybe 12 people in that part of the winery at that time. So we did Summer of '69 by Bryan Adams, and he's he just starts in, right? And it was kind of like, well, I was just about to finish like this Clapton tune, right? And he kind of picked it up, and he started playing Summer of '69. So I'm like, well, if I was like 20-something years old and I had my dreads and I was like, back in the day, right? I'd be like, stop, bro, that's not, like, get off my stage. It wasn't like that, but it's like, I'm not like that. I'm like 40-something-year-old guy now, like playing in a winery, and like I do kind of need the cash. So, okay, let's play Summer '69, and I'm good with the changes. I'm just gonna watch your hands. But then when it came time to do second song, it was break time, and then he and I had a little conversation. It's like, hey, they pay me to provide this. We haven't practiced, maybe some other time. And that was one of those moments.
Yeah.
So hey, here's a way to feel the storm at a gig. Nothing to do with anybody drinking or anything going wrong in that realm, but often when it comes to the volume, we're getting right back to the first topic that we touched on. I like to look around at the crowd and see, like, if it's a dinner gig and the volume might be an issue. I always want to find which table is going to complain about the volume if it's an issue. And I want to tell them, like, if there's people right near me eating dinner, I'll say, hey, just let me know if it's too loud at any point. Because I'd rather hear directly from the patron than have them complain to the establishment.
You're a professional, Flint. I like that.
And along those lines, whenever you go into a new place and it's the first time you're playing there, ask the management the same question. Look, it's the first time I've ever played here. I just want to make sure that what I'm doing is appropriate for your customers. So please, if the volume is too much or too little, I always like to throw that in there. Or if it's too quiet, you come up with, and sometimes people will. They'll be like, yeah, turn up. We like to hear what you're doing. You're being too quiet. We want to hear more. That does happen.
And if you let them know that you're sensitive to the volume, then it's that much smoother whenever anybody has to say anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Flint. And along those lines, always make sure that you turn your amp down before you unplug your instrument, man, because the one thing people in a restaurant don't want to hear is pop! They don't want to hear that, man. They do not want to hear squealing, distortion. They don't want to hear any of that stuff. So make sure your stuff is turned all the way down while you're plugging in, and turn it up slowly. Make sure you know that nothing dramatic is going to happen, because that's a surefire way to get like half of the room immediately against you right away.
Yeah. They'll remember you for all the wrong reasons. And another one that it's specifically for stick with, because a lot of us come from playing guitar, bass, keyboard, sax, whatever it may be. So we have these kind of previous experiences with our other instrument. One that I've found with stick is that you want to take your cable and wrap it up and underneath the belt hook. So you don't.
Oh man, it took me so many years to figure that out. That's what we're talking about, everybody. Okay, just for the people at home. All right, so you don't plug your cable in like this and leave it dangling, because you're going to step on it while you're playing and pull it out, and it's going to happen. And at least 10 years in before I realized, yes, he's absolutely right. You put it over the belt hook and plug it in.
There it is.
Nice and safe. Thank you, Gene. That's a good one, man.
That is a good one.
That one's just for stickists, right?
Especially if you have an active pickup. You really want it if you've got an active pickup. And listen, when it comes out like that, don't just plug it right back in. Turn your amp down first, dude, and then plug it back in.
It's all about finesse.
Right. Like that. First they didn't like you. Now they really don't like you. They're certain don't.
Well, here's the other thing to do before you turn your volume up at all. Tune up your stick.
That's right.
Do not leave home without your tuner. If you don't have your tuner, tune quietly.
Yep.
When you turn your amp up, just play like chords, so that you can hear if you're out of tune. But do it quietly, and don't start playing unless you're dead certain that you're in tune. Just don't do it. People don't mind waiting a little bit. You've got to be in tune before you start, because if you've got 10 or 12 strings to worry about, by the time you played that first chord of your song, it's too late, and then you got to figure out what's going on. Yeah, and I tune while I play a lot of the times too. Like if I'm like bending everything out like crazy and I'm in the middle of a song and I hear something's out of tune, I'm not going to stop playing to tune my stick. I'm going to go to that string and I'm going to play around it, and I'm going to reach up with my hand and I'm going to tune it while I'm playing, so that the song is not interrupted, and then I'm right back into the mix. You got to be able to do that stuff.
That's how Jimi Hendrix would do it.
Exactly. I was about to make a Hendrix comment. There is more footage of that man playing out of tune. Like, I mean, like, God bless him. He's, like, fantastic. But, man, he was, like, he always liked the new strings, right, and new material and that sort of thing. But there is a fair amount of material of him, you know, kind of.
And if you're using a MIDI device, make sure you're tuned to the MIDI device and not just to yourself, because you're not playing with that MIDI device, and all of a sudden you kick on that MIDI device, and if you're out of tune with that, it sounds really, really bad.
Yeah. A couple of the things I suppose, specifically with the stick, that I wanted to mention is that, so I look right at my instrument when I'm playing. Rarely is my head up. Now there's David, you're one of them, where you can like be off like thinking about like what's in the fridge and stuff like that. I've seen you play. Like you're basically like really free with in that regards. Now I generally look down and at my instrument, and so that's something you kind of need to be aware of when you're playing, right? Is that how are you being perceived? I suppose you can't overthink that too much. You got to do your thing. But something that I do like to do is that when I'm not looking down at my instrument, is acknowledge people, and if people have questions right then and there, maybe you can take one or two. But
a smile goes a long way. One thing I learned, I've got a friend, Ken Bonfield. He's a steel string acoustic fingerstyle player, and I was hanging out with him at a house concert here, and then after every number, you know, he's looking at the guitar playing. When he's finished, this big smile comes across his face, and then he'll look up at people, and it's that kind of little connection to the audience that really goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah,
and not only that, but if you choose to smile, that can help you put yourself in a better mood too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, so Victor, I had a question for you. We haven't heard too much from you. Did I see something on the Stickist where you had recently performed?
Well, I use the word performed in a very loose sense, but we did my little three-piece garage band. We played a local Saturday market a few times over the summer. So that was. I'm starting out small. We're background music, and they kind of appreciated what we were doing. We were doing all instrumentals. Most of it was older stuff. A few stuff that might have been recent, but most of the stuff that we played was old stuff like a little some surf tunes, Green Onions, or Coming Home Baby, things that people would recognize. And that was. So a lot of what has been talked about here kind of will come in handy for me for that too, because we're background stuff, and at a Saturday market, we got a lot of compliments because we weren't playing too loud, and since we didn't have vocals, there wasn't. It's a little less distracting when people are trying to do business. That was some of the feedback that we got, but so there was a lot to learn for me there. It's really the first time I've actually played the stick out where I was more able to be seen, and so yeah.
This is really valuable for us, because there's a lot of people that are new to the instrument that are still kind of building up their confidence. So tell me a little bit about the band, right? Like the band that you're in, like the pieces that you're playing with. And then tell me about like the rig that you loaded up, because we'll talk about equipment here next. I think that's something we need to approach. I think we're going to do about 10 or 15 more minutes here, and then we're going to break. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about like who you're playing with, and just some kind of things that you saw in those first experiences that you'd share with stick players that are gearing up for some of their first gigs.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm very ignorant because I've been doing this I bought my stick 3.5 years ago, and that was my first foray into this. So this is all me learning from a point of near total ignorance. There's three of us. We have a drummer, we have a guitar player, and then we have me. About 2/3 to somewhere between a half and 2/3 of the songs I'm playing bass. About a third to half of the songs I'll be doing some chord support and whatnot. And so we're basically playing instrumental covers of some songs that have lyrics and some that don't. Heard It Through the Grapevine. Obviously, everyone knows that song, but we're not singing it. We're just jam into it, or walk, don't run, and wipe out. That's actually everyone likes that. That's usually when the first tip usually starts showing up. And a couple other ones, smooth operator, we kind of enjoy doing that. It's got a nice groove to it, and our guitar player likes to jam to that. One of the eye openers for me, so I have, as far as equipment goes, I just have a bass amp. It's a pretty high-end bass amp, and it's not really appreciated by everybody on the Stickist, but it's an amp that.
Those guys.
But anyway. So that's all I bring. Is I bring my amp. I have a simple pedal board with a multi-effects pedal for each side of the instrument, going into a mixer, then going into the bass amp. The guitar player has he's got a PA system, and it's about a mid-level PA system. It's not really fancy, but it's decent. And so my amp signal goes out to his mixer, and then it goes out the front. So I'm mainly using mine as a monitor. So I don't know what else what else. This is
good. Well, I mean, just for starters, I mean, half the gig is showing up, right? I mean, you got to be there, and it's nice that I think that a band situation. So this is something kind of Vlad's talking about. It's like having the support of your friends and other people, and so you're in a more traditional kind of bass role. That's how I started. Certainly, I didn't start playing in a company. That's just like I never. I always wanted to do that, but when I played with the Inclined. It had a drummer and a guitarist, right?
Yeah.
So that was like a perfect opportunity. Now, the stick is not a bass and the bass is not a stick, but you can get really pretty darn close if you're focused on that and you've got the right amp. I'm curious to know, like, what kind of amp was it? Are you going to tell us, or are you just going to make us?
Oh no, it's a Mark bass. It's a Mark bass CMD 102P. It's a combo amp. I chose it because it's light. And I chose it because it's also at the same time it's powerful, and since it's combo, it's one piece. I can carry my whole rig in one trip from the car. I got my amp in one hand, my stick in the other hand, and I've got a shoulder bag with my pedal board, and then so if I want to, if I've got to park far away, it's one trip.
Yeah.
And it's I like the sound of it. I think it does a decent job with both sides of the instrument, and so So that's what it's a Mark bass.
Is it like a 210 or a 115 or a 112?
It's a 210.
A 210. Okay. So Mark bass, Italian company. They've got these very kind of you can tell them right away. They're all black with like the orange writing.
Yeah, you can't miss it from about a mile away. Yeah.
They've become more popular. They've really kind of taken over the space that was occupied by Trace Elliott a long time ago, back in the late 80s and mid 90s. So
is that it? Okay.
a high-end, manufacturer in Italy, and very good, respectable. I can't remember the name of the gentleman who had one out in Interlaken grade, but it sounded great. And for bass, it is really solid. Cool. I think that's kind of a great experience to have, just to share, for people who are just just so close to doing it, because no one who just picks up the stick can actually go out and play solo. Although there's this cat, what's his name, Rodrigo, is pretty intense. I mean, he's a professional bassist. He's adapted to the instrument very quickly and he probably is classically trained to be able to. And Boaz, you probably saw him out there, right, Rodrigo Serrao?
Yeah, actually, I met him before the Mallorca jam. He came to Israel playing with, I don't know if you heard about him, Dan Reichel. You know about him?
I know. I've heard some of his material. It's beautiful.
He's an Israeli musician, but plays worldwide, more than in Israel. So he grabs musicians from all around the world playing with them. And Rodrigo was one of them. Was a guest here in Israel.
Yep. Yeah. Well, he's a Railboard guy now. He's fantastic. So that's kind of fun to hear. I didn't know that. So now, Elias, we haven't really had a chance to talk to you. We're coming up on time, but I suppose, are you playing out? Are you thinking about playing out, or what are you?
I just got my stick a few days ago, so I'm new to the forum and I'm new to the instrument. I've been playing bass for quite a few years.
Don't forget to eat and sleep.
Yeah.
So show it to us. Show us the stick, man. Tell us about it. Come on. You've got that new stick smile.
My new stick smile. It's a wingy grand stick with turquoise line inlays. uh, black hardware, black open tuners.
So, did you order that new or did you buy it used?
Yeah, I ordered new. I had to wait. So, but it's here. I got it with a stick up, and initially a matched reciprocal with high bass fourth, and eventually I wanna experiment with DVR. But as of right now, I just decided to go with matched reciprocal with high bass fourth. And that's it. I got a.
Everyone has questions for you.
Yeah. So again, I'm new to the party. Like I said, I've been playing bass for quite a few years, but and owning it and playing a Chapman stick has been a dream for me. And I finally, it's the beginning of a journey.
Cool, man. We're glad you're here. So now everyone's going to ask you a question. Now, who's going to go first here?
Silence. How long did you wait for it to arrive?
Not that much, actually. I think I was very fortunate, like 2 months.
Oh.
2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
Yeah. Well, I know it's nothing, but it seemed like forever. But I've contacted Stick Enterprises a few years ago. I know that the waiting list was way longer, but I was fortunate that when I decided to pay for it and then jump in, the waiting list was only 2 months. So
What kind of music are you gonna make lately?
so I really like progressive metal. So starting out, I want to incorporate it into my kind of music, with my band. Slowly, once I feel more comfortable with the music that and how I play, I'll be able to, all the ideas that I have on my head to, actually be able to play it in the instrument, incorporate that into my band, the music that we do.
Well, I guess the first one you heard is John Young.
On my own, well, New Millennium, I really like, Dream Theater, and I'm, on my own, only play that song with the Chapman stick, which is
Liquid Tension Experiment, man. Tony's stuff with Liquid Tension.
I mean, Tony's great, and actually, I'm looking forward with having some classes with Greg, and again, I have it's the beginning of a journey. So, thank you for having me in the forums and for helping you guys, making me all, helping me make all the decisions.
That's good. Seriously, like it's it's funny because like in 2 years from now, you're gonna have all these questions for new stick players. You're like, hey, how did you do this? Because like there's this moment when you're new to the instrument and you have this kind of fresh perspective and after a while you kind of get set in your ways. Greg, what are you doing?
Why we're here, which is to talk about the gigging stickist. And this
all right.
thing that the gigging stickist needs, and that is your truss wrench. Don't leave home without your truss wrench. Right?
Absolutely.
Make sure that it's double because I've broken like 2 regular wrenches and well.
Sometimes you just need a double. I've never needed a triple, but sometimes you need a double. This is the other thing you never want to leave home without, your stick cable. Okay? Don't leave home without your stick cable. Because it's very hard to find one at like 9 o'clock at night.
So speaking of forgetting things, I played this. It was kind of festival thing once, and I got there and I had all my equipment, everything except I forgot my belt, and I wasn't wearing a belt. And I was like, oh well, this shouldn't be a problem. It's it's like an arts and crafts festival. Somebody should be selling belts. So I walked all around, and the only belt I could find was like this multicolored kind of tie-dyed belt with a giant Buddha belt buckle. But I paid like $17 for it, and it got me through the gig. And then I gave it to someone as a gift.
Oh, too bad you don't have the belt. I want to see it, man.
Yeah.
But this is the other thing I wanted to show you guys. So early on, before there was an internet, back when I first started playing the stick, and before you could just like go find anything you needed anywhere, the stick I got was a used stick, and the cable was kind of dicey. And so I had a friend make this thing for me, which is it's a splitter box, and it was originally this little box made by Boss, back in the 80s. It's called a J44, and it has quarter-inch ends on one side, and it has RCA plugs and mini plugs on the other side. All right, and it's 2 channels. So he just stuck a quarter-inch stereo jack in the top and wired that into each of the sides. And so this is like my backup thing in case my stick cable dies. I usually have a spare like TRS cable as part of my rig, for operating volume pedals and switches and stuff like that. And so I can plug this in and interface with anything. You'll find all kinds of devices like this you'll pick up over the years are really handy things to have.
So, Greg, that box specifically, is that available in some form nowadays with a stereo in and all those outs?
I have no idea. Well, the stereo in was added to the box. So basically what it was just a conversion box. So it's converting quarter-inch signals to RCA and mini plug signals. And I'm sure you could find adapters like this somewhere.
They're out there.
He just drilled a hole in the top and added the stereo jack and then wired it into the 2 different independent channels.
All right.
We'll look for a stereo adapter box, and you should be able, to modify it very easily to do this.
Behringer has some stuff out there. If you
want on eBay right now.
Yeah, if you can get something out on the cheap, like for Behringer has these kind of in boxes. I'm trying to think of another. There's a couple other companies that have those types of devices, and they're really good to have. Something to Summit. Greg? There's a European company that made something in a what's his name? Randy had one. That takes actually a TRS input, and it's got 2. Do you know the one I'm talking about? It's
what you're talking about now.
No, okay, all right.
And then the other thing, if you're going on the road for a tour, this is the other thing that you need.
A spare.
2 sticks.
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, if something happens and you don't have a stick, you're sunk.
Yeah.
So get yourself an old stick, an old second-hand stick. If you're going to be out on the road gigging, make sure you have a spare instrument with you, because there's no substitute for it when you need it.
Right. So the general thought process there is contingency, right?
Yeah, contingency.
Backup.
I always try to have 2 amps, because if your amp dies, you can't play. So I'd rather have 2 amps. And maybe not even need one, or use them both, and then if something happens to one of the amps, you've got a spare. Spare cables, spare batteries. But the one thing that I wanted to say, Gene, this is getting back to your very first point about your winery gig. Bring some food with you when you go to do the gig. And eat a little something before you play, because there's nothing worse than like having a blood sugar crash.
Yeah.
While you're playing your set, or having that wine just hit you really hard, and you might find that you're stuck in traffic before the gig. Maybe you thought you were going to get to eat something before you played your set. You're stuck in traffic. You don't have time. Bring food.
Yeah, that's true. So I have on a 3-hour gig, I'll play 45 minutes on the hour. It's really hard to get in 15 minutes to actually run across the street and grab something to eat, right? You're in a winery. They serve fermented grapes. That's what they're serving. You can't get like crackers. You can't get like a sandwich or a taco or something like that. So yeah, definitely bring
because
snacks.
they want people to get drunk and buy more wine. So they don't.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason you're there. So listen, you guys, I think we're just at about time. I think we're at about 60 minutes. We did talk a little bit, so I'm kind of looking back on what we talked about. We did talk a little bit about volume. We talked about like actually getting gigs and different ways to go about doing that. You can have a CD, you can mail it out, but I tell you, to David's point, nothing beats showing up and just showing them what you've got. If you can do that in sort of an unaccompanied format. There's also open mics. Vlad, in your case, there's like nights that are dedicated to that sort of thing. So you've got to take advantage of that. We talked about can you hear yourself, right? You've got to be able to like establish that, like look out for number one. You got to make sure that you can hear yourself and other people can hear you, and then also to Flint's point, can you hear what you need to hear, right? You're looking around the room, kind of sussing it up, making sure that, maybe after a song you ask everyone, can you hear me okay? Which people do all the time. I think it's, to the musicians, you kind of go like, well, is he just trying to get applause, or is he just like, throwing people a bone here? But really, it's good for the musician to get that kind of feedback. A couple of the things that we talked about are booking quality shows. Another one of Flint's excellent points, and that is don't try to book a lot of shows. Book good shows that will appreciate you, that will give you an opportunity to do what David was kind of talking about, and also what Victor was talking about, which is like allow you to kind of stretch, to let you do your thing, to represent yourself, to present what it is that your art, right, and what makes you unique and that sort of thing. We talked a little bit about background versus performance, whether it's just you up there on a stage and nothing else is going on, or whether it's you in more of kind of like a dinner surrounding where you're providing the ambience, where you are the ambience as opposed to you are the entertainment. So there's a difference there. Playing for the first time, we talked a little bit about that. Don't stop, is my 2 cents, right? Just don't stop. Like, shake it off and get back in the huddle. David talked about kind of challenging oneself, finding that gig, finding that moment, or being in a situation where you're comfortable enough to really kind of challenge yourself. And a real quick sidebar on that, I played a gig up in Idlewild at Cafe Aroma, and there was this fantastic acoustic guitarist, and the first thing he did was he came out and he played the first Invention, and then he played Joy of Man's Desiring, both of which I do. And so I was like, well, this guy's playing all the songs that I'm going to play, and I kind of talked to him afterwards. He's like, oh, he's like I didn't mean to do that. He's like, I said, but your focus was so solid. How do you do that? And his kind of mindset was, this is just a rehearsal for me, and all these people are invited to come and be with me. But he's like, really, he's like, he got into a headspace where it was like just all about him, and he was able to feel comfortable, to feel confident, where he could express himself with a very high level of confidence. And you probably get that in the band surrounding, Vic and Greg, you probably get that with when you're playing out with your trio or whether you're playing as a soloist, just because you've done it a lot. So, right, we are what we do repeatedly. And then kind of this was one of the last 2 points here, which another point by Flint, which is like, seek out that opportunity to address someone that may have questions for you later, right? Whether that's the establishment, as Greg mentioned, or whether that is whether that's a specific table that's close to where your amp may be, right? So these are some kind of highlights from the gigging Stickist, what we're talking about today. I'm sure there'll be more, and hopefully there'll be some comments that people want to chime in on the Stickist or out on YouTube when we post this. I did want to give everyone a chance to kind of throw another kind of 60-second comment before we wrap up. Did anyone have anything else that they wanted to add before we roll?
Bring Band-Aids and a nail clipper to your gig.
Band-Aids and clippers, okay.
And
Hey, Greg, do you have props for that Band-Aid and clippers that you can show us what they look like too?
I don't have my bag handy that I can show you, but I will tell you that they're typical, average, everyday Band-Aids. And I don't mean that I have to use the Band-Aids after I use the nail clippers. I know how to use them.
Okay, I want to pose a question for everyone here to answer quickly. Okay, if you're at a gig and you're in the middle of a song and somebody passes by and they interrupt you to ask you what the instrument is, are you going to answer them while you play? Yes or no, and why? Greg.
I get this every night, and it quite literally depends maybe on the song, maybe on the person, and sometimes I get like face talkers who come up and stand like right in front of me with their face right in mine. Say,
Jim told us about it. So someone got to him in the middle of his playing in this distance. Hey, what is this instrument?
Yeah, you're gonna. The first thing you have to learn how to do if you're gonna perform as a soloist with the stick is you have to learn how to play and talk at the same time.
Unless you're singing.
Yeah. Well, but you just gotta go into a holding pattern is what I do. Go into that holding pattern.
Yep.
Answer the question. Find like one chord that you can stay on and play through that chord while you answer the question, and then you're like, okay, now get out of my face. No, and then you're like, back to music. Turn your head down to the board and start playing again. They'll go away. And then,
You want to see the dessert menu? Is my favorite. Like seriously, like, am I not up here working? Another one. So on that note,
I got to tell you though. Real quick. I got to tell you this story though. Okay. I'm sorry. I know we're up against the time, but I got to tell you this story. So I was playing at a restaurant gig on a Tuesday night, and of course there's nobody there, and it's pouring rain outside, and there's nobody there. It's me, a waitress, a bartender, and a manager. Okay. And we're all bored out of our tears, bored to tears, including me. And then I see these police cars go flying down the road in front of the restaurant. And the next thing I know, this guy comes busting through the front door. And the stage is right by the front door. And he's stoked. And he's like crazed. And he runs up in front of the stage and he sits down at this table. And he's like dripping wet all over the floor. And I stopped playing. I'm just looking at him like, what in the world is going on? And he says, well, don't just sit there. Pluck.
Pluck.
And before I had a chance to say to him, well, this is a Chapman stick. He's happy. He was out the door, and the cops were down the road the other direction.
Wow.
That's a good story.
Wow. I'd never heard that one, Greg. That's a good one. Was that in Charlottesville?
What's that?
Was that in Charlottesville?
In Charlottesville at a place called Basin Street. And I'm not kidding, it was torrential rain, and the guy was totally out of his mind, and the cops were chasing him, and he was just like, didn't leave a tip, nothing.
The next time you see Greg, look!
Don't just sit there.
I
would like to add one more thing.
So I bring a music stand, and I put Bob's book down there. So I'll open that up to a specific page, and I'll literally just point to the book because I'm totally I can't do what you guys are saying. Like I'm engaged.
I've often thought about making a sign and just having it next to me. It's called the stick.
Yeah, people don't pay attention to that. I tried that.
Get a stick book, set it up on a music stand, like.
With the 10 most frequently asked questions, put it in front of you.
Yeah, right. So I'd like to add one thing. Some of my greatest allies in that are the servers. I play a lot of the same places over and over, and the servers have learned my little spiel about the Chapman stick, and so I'll hear them at a table answering questions about the instrument, and I cannot stress how important it is, like when you're playing gigs, to like tip your server, tip whoever is taking care of you, and be good to the people there, because that's how I get a lot of gigs back, is not from the owner walking, but from hearing things from the servers saying, wow, people really like this guy, and that kind of feedback. So it really pays.
Yeah, exactly. If you figure 5 to 10% of what you make goes back into the establishment, it's a good investment, because then it comes back to it. All right, well, we should wrap up, but I want to thank you, everyone. So Boaz, David, Elias, Clint, Vlad, Greg, Vic, another great conversation. This will head on up to YouTube, like in the next 5 or 10 minutes here, and I'll be sure to post it up on the Stickist and out there on all our favorite Facebook forums. I want to thank you again and wish you guys a very happy Freakin' Friday. And I hope that you all have a great weekend. Whether you're gigging or whether you're not, or whether you're planning your next gig, I look forward to revisiting this discussion again for those of you who haven't been performing, and to all the great progress you'll be making.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.